Well, hello again, everybody. This is going to be part 2 in my miniseries, The Music I Hear. This time, starring the NES. The NES was the first gaming system I ever played, and in a very big way, besides what was on the radio or played in my house, it was also host to some of the first music I ever heard. It was probably one of the first times in my life I got to choose which music I wanted to hear, by choosing which game I wanted to play. And I feel a lot of my decisions in game choice back then were heavily influenced by what music I wanted to hear. It turned my NES from a gaming system into an interactive jukebox of sorts where I could hear all my favorite songs. The 8-bit tunes might be one of the simplest forms of music due to its technical limitations, but back then it sounded like a full orchestra to me, and growing up with it led me to have a love for creating my own 8-bit music as well, which you've probably heard featured in a few of my videos. So with no further ado, and with so many amazing songs to choose from, with no ranking in mind, let's dive ears first into the NES library and listen to a few of the songs I hear when I merely look at my NES. One of the first songs I hear in my head when looking at my NES is the first level music from the game The Goonies 2. It's the first game I ever remember getting as a gift, and one of the first games I probably ever played besides Super Mario Bros., and the NES game that I sank the most time into as a kid. This first level music is the first song you hear in the game because the intro into the title screen and the demo are oddly and eerily kind of silent but for the sound effects. And because of that, this tune carries a lot more weight when it finally comes on. As far as the song itself is concerned, it's quite a fun and jovial tune. I swear I can feel it putting a literal bounce in my step whenever I hear it. But to be fair, this song is actually not exclusive to the Goonies 2, as it is also found in the game The Goonies on the Famicom, which never saw a North American release. It wasn't until many years later, through the advent of gaming emulators, that I played The Goonies 1 and realized that. To be even more fair, however, this song is not even exclusive to the Goonies video games, because it is also in the Goonies movie. Yup. This song is actually Cyndi Lauper's Goonies Are Good Enough, written for the Goonies movie. I guess I was a fan of Cyndi Lauper without even realizing it. I guess you could say it was like the title track for the movie. I mean, it's got the word Goonies in it. It's written definitely for the movie. So now I can see why it was featured so heavily in both games. Now this might have been obvious to anyone who has actually seen the movie at the time, but my learning of the Goonies actually was reversed to what most people's are. Instead of watching the Goonies, then playing the Goonies 1, then playing the Goonies 2, I played the Goonies 2 first, then the Goonies 1 many years later, then saw the movie even more years after that. The title track of the Goonies video games are good enough to have stayed in my brain and my heart for decades now. But you know what, technically it's not an NES exclusive song and it's just a chiptune version of a pop song. Although it's very fun to listen to, I'm not really counting it for this list's purposes. So let's move on to a song that actually is an NES exclusive. Now come on, who doesn't know and love this song, right? Bloody Tears in Castlevania 2 might be one of the most iconic video game songs of all time, regardless of system. It's unintentionally ironic that it ended up being in one of the most controversial and polarizing entries into the series, though Castlevania 2 is still a game I love despite its many flaws. Part of the reason behind the power of this song is because it's a really well-written song, and the other part is because of its usage within the game and our first experience with it. After walking around town for a little bit talking to others and gathering misinformation and useless information, we venture out into the wild to conquer the many scary enemies that will oppose us. So we just go right and bam, there we are, hit with our first enemies. Now even though this song might sound upbeat, cheerful, and friendly, when heard in this first situation it takes on the qualities of being tense, exhilarating, and thrilling. It takes on an even more thrilling and frightening tone when the game shifts from day to night. The combination of this song and this nighttime scene are really what made it stick with me for years and years. This is what I picture in the background when I hear this song. And this was also one of the first horror movie scenes I was able to experience that was kid-friendly. Having that kind of freedom to experience that feeling whenever I wanted was liberating, and all the more reason that Bloody Tears for me is one of the first songs I hear when looking at my NES. You're probably saying to yourself right now, Demon Sword? What freaking game is this? Well, it's an obscure one, no doubt, and it's one that I owned growing up, and now is on my list of games I like but not because they're good games. You press up to jump. Jumping is absolutely insanely difficult to be particular with. Your sword is even shorter than the guys in Sword of Vermilion, though it does grow as the game goes on, and enemies just seem to rain down endlessly with no rhyme or reason. Not really the makings of a great game right there. The rest of the music besides this title track is pretty lackluster, with only what I believe is one boss tune and acoustic atrocities such as this. But still, even though this title song is pretty short, it's still pretty kick-ass to me. It's got some good energy with its galloping tempo and chord changes, but it's the usage of this one particular tone that really cements this song into my brain. And unlike the emulated distorted guitar that usually is in this music, it's actually distorted, so it takes on a different quality there, something more visceral. Let's not rest on our laurels too much yet though, and let's get on to the next song. Is this another game that you've never heard of or played before? Well, if your answer is yes, then for shame, because you are missing out on an absolute treasure and cult classic game in a series of cult classics. Maniac Mansion is one of the funniest, most quirky games you will ever play. And it even has a few jump scares that as a little kid I was terrified of. Now, it's funny to think that something so comical could have actually induced fear in me back then, but so much in this game is creepy and weird I just didn't know what to expect next, and that made it tense. I was never really a big fan of point-and-click games as they usually left me pretty bored, but I don't think boredom is something I ever felt while playing Maniac Mansion. It always seemed like there was something new to see, and new experiences to have with the multiple playthroughs you could have with all the characters. And with each character came a song that was created just for them and fits them quite nicely. Whether it's Jeff's surfer rock tune, Bernard's Devo-esque nerd synth, or Dave's I'm Definitely the Main Character song, you're guaranteed to hear a tune that clicks with the character and will get stuck in your head for a good while. Along with the songs for each of the characters, the other music in the game is pretty awesome as well, and will keep your ears entertained for many, many playthroughs. But it's Razor's theme that always stuck out to me. Leader of the punk rock troupe Razor and the Scumettes. I swear I think I've always been a metalhead, and can point to stuff like this for being an influence. When I think of Maniac Mansion, this blues-inspired punk rock tune always comes to mind first. The tempo, melody, and instrumentation make it feel like you're actually listening to a band play a song and not a machine play one. The composer packed a lot of mood and energy into this one, and that's why I love it. And why it comes to mind so often when thinking of my Nintendo. So coming from a few unknown games, to a couple of cult classics, to a well-known cult classic, it's Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! A game that was monumental in my gaming history and probably most of yours as well. Now, I'm not going to say what I think you should do if somehow you've never played or enjoyed this masterpiece. I don't know that you're even a video game enthusiast if you've never played Punch-Out! So I might not need to go into too much detail about why it is such a masterpiece for the reasons of gameplay, design, and replayability, but I will go into it regarding the music. After just a little while playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, you will have the fight music, the get-up music, and the training music stuck in your head, as well as all the fighters' other themes. But every time you plug this game into your NES and turn it on, you're gonna hear those bells go off, followed by the wonderful theme song. I mean, I've heard it so many times I practically snort it in my sleep, and I don't think I ever hummed it without going do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do at the end. The whole title screen is great, in fact. The bell going off, the title theme, and then that boxing glove punching through like it's the exclamation mark at the end. And then it gives you that little breath before you say, okay, let's go. So with all this rocking and blood-pumping music from games across a variety of genres and popularities, What's the song I hear most when looking at my NES? Well, it's none other than the underground theme in Super Mario Bros. Now look, I'm probably just as shocked as you are. Shocked that with all the instrumentation in other NES songs, and with the beautifully simple and perfect orchestration of other tunes, that this song, with one instrument, one melody, and a scant 10-second loop with no percussion at all, would be what I think of most when I think of my NES. But I can't control what comes to mind first, can I? I can only look at it and try and figure out why. When you ask most people what song comes to mind when they think of Super Mario Bros., they're most likely gonna go, you know, that one, the main one, the one everyone knows. But for me, when I think of Super Mario Bros., I always think of this underground theme first. And I think once again it's because of its placement within the game. You go through the first level, which is a breeze, drop through the ground to this darkened dungeon-esque type setting, and are greeted with this somewhat foreboding tune. The lack of any other instruments or percussion, and all those silent parts give this level a very precarious feel to it. I almost feel as if I'm carefully spelunking my way through a cave, wondering what lies ahead. Like most of you, Super Mario Bros. Was the first game I ever played. And the first level was the first theme song I ever heard. And this underground theme was the first time I felt slightly nervous about progressing with something that was fun to me. That contradiction is probably why it resonates with me so deeply.